Jerome Powell holds one of the most powerful economic jobs in the world. As the chair of the Federal Reserve, he heads the Central Bank of the United States. His decisions have a direct impact on the cost of borrowing money, the rate of inflation, and the overall health of the American economy. Appointed initially by Donald Trump in 2017 and then reappointed by Joe Biden, Powell has navigated the economy through the turbulent waters of a pandemic and the subsequent surge in inflation. His role requires a delicate balance, aiming for stable prices and maximum employment while remaining independent from political influence. This independence is a cornerstone of the Federal Reserve's credibility, ensuring that its choices are based on data, not on the shifting winds of partisan politics. However, the ground beneath the Federal Reserve seems to be shifting. Here in Washington on June 9, 2025, whispers have grown into a steady hum of speculation. Reports are circulating that Powell might be considering stepping down from his post before his term officially ends in May 2026. While there has been no official statement from Powell or the Federal Reserve confirming these rumors, the possibility has ignited a firestorm of discussion. The idea of an early exit has been fueled by the recent election of Donald Trump and his well-documented dissatisfaction with Powell's leadership. The financial world is watching closely, trying to decipher what this potential change could mean for the future of economic policy. The speculation is not just idle gossip. It reflects a very real tension between the White House and the central bank. President Trump has never been shy about his criticism of the Fed's decisions under Powell. In recent weeks, sources suggest the president has made his displeasure known, arguing that the Fed's current interest rate policy is holding back economic growth. While prediction markets are still weighing the odds, with some showing a low probability of an immediate removal, the persistent nature of these rumors suggests a significant political pressure campaign is underway. Powell has publicly affirmed that he would not resign if asked, but the tense atmosphere is undeniable and raises questions about the Fed's long-cherished autonomy. The core of the issue lies in the fundamental role of the Fed chair. Powell sees his mandate as managing the economy for long-term stability, even if it means making unpopular decisions in the short term, like keeping interest rates steady to ensure inflation is truly under control. His term is legislatively protected to insulate him from exactly this kind of political pressure. Yet the current situation is testing the very limits of that institutional independence. For now, Powell remains at the helm, but the constant speculation about his departure creates an environment of uncertainty that affects not just financial markets, but the confidence of businesses and consumers across the country. The disagreement between President Trump and Jerome Powell is not new, but it has reached a critical point. Its foundation is a deep-seated difference in economic philosophy. President Trump has consistently advocated for a pro-growth agenda, which, in his view, requires low interest rates to encourage borrowing, spending, and investment. He believes that the threat of inflation has been overstated, and that the Federal Reserve's caution is stifling the American economy. From his perspective, every decision by the Fed to hold rates steady, as they have done for the last 3 meetings at 4.25% to 4.5%, is a missed opportunity to unleash greater prosperity and support American workers. This view has been a central theme of his economic message. This ideological clash was on full display in the lead-up to the current rumors. Reports indicate that President Trump summoned Powell to the White House shortly after the election, expressing his firm belief that the Fed was making a mistake by not cutting interest rates immediately. For the president, the Fed's primary role should be to actively stimulate the economy, especially when he sees growth as lagging. He has publicly stated that while he doesn't intend to fire Powell, he expects the chair to align with his vision, or step aside. This puts Powell in an incredibly difficult position, caught between his legal mandate for independence and the immense pressure from the executive branch. President Trump's vision for the Federal Reserve is one that is more directly aligned with his America First economic policy. He seeks a leader who is, in his words, pro-America and anti-globalist. This suggests a desire for a Fed that prioritizes domestic economic growth above all else, potentially at the expense of traditional concerns like long-term inflation control or international monetary stability. The criticism directed at Powell is therefore not just about a single policy decision, it's about the entire operational philosophy of the central bank. Trump wants a Fed that acts as a partner in his administration's economic agenda, a significant departure from its traditional role as an impartial steward. Ultimately, the president's desire for a new Fed chair is about control. He views the independent Federal Reserve as an obstacle to his policy goals. By installing a leader who shares his economic worldview, he could more easily implement policies aimed at rapid economic expansion. While Powell insists that the Fed's decisions are driven by economic data, Trump sees them as political choices that are actively harming his agenda. This fundamental conflict over the role and purpose of the nation's central bank is why the search for a potential successor to Powell is being pursued with such intensity, setting the stage for a major shift in United States economic policy. As speculation about Powell's future intensifies, a list of potential replacements is beginning to take shape, each representing a significant departure from the current Fed leadership. At the forefront of this list is Judy Shelton, a former economic advisor to President Trump. Shelton is known for her unconventional and often controversial economic views. She has been a vocal critic of the Federal Reserve's current structure and has, in the past, advocated for a return to the gold standard, a system where the value of the dollar would be linked to a fixed amount of gold. Such a move would dramatically restrict the Fed's ability to manage the money supply and respond to economic crises, a radical shift from decades of monetary policy. Another prominent name being discussed is Kevin Warsh, a former governor of the Federal Reserve. Warsh has more traditional credentials than Shelton, but he is also known for his conservative economic leanings and has been critical of the Fed's policies in the past. He has ties to influential conservative think tanks and is seen as someone who would be more inclined to prioritize growth and deregulation. His appointment would be viewed as a move toward a more politically aligned Federal Reserve, one that is more responsive to the administration's economic priorities. While less radical than Shelton's proposals, a Fed led by Warsh would still likely pursue a more aggressive rate-cutting strategy than Powell has been willing to consider. Beyond these well-known figures, there is talk of a dark horse candidate emerging from the private sector. This individual would likely be chosen for their strong alignment with President Trump's America First economic vision. The ideal candidate from this perspective would be someone less concerned with the orthodoxies of central banking and more focused on using monetary policy as a tool to boost domestic industries and employment. This reflects a desire to break from the established norms of Washington and install a leader who is seen as a true outsider, fully committed to the president's agenda without being constrained by the institution's traditional culture of independence and data-driven caution. The common thread among all these potential candidates is their perceived loyalty to President Trump's economic philosophy. The selection process appears to be less about finding the most experienced central banker and more about finding a leader who will not challenge the White House's policy direction. Whether it's Shelton, Warsh, or an unknown figure, the next Fed chair under Trump would be expected to usher in an era of lower interest rates and a focus on short-term economic stimulus. This represents a fundamental rethinking of the Federal Reserve's role, moving it from an independent arbiter to an active participant in the administration's political and economic strategy. The prospect of a leadership change at the Federal Reserve is already sending ripples through financial markets. On Monday, the Dow Jones Industrial Average saw a slight dip, a sign of the uncertainty that now hangs over Wall Street. Investors value predictability, and the potential for a sudden shift in monetary policy creates nervousness. A Federal Reserve led by a Trump appointee is widely expected to pursue aggressive interest rate cuts. While some sectors, like the cryptocurrency market, reacted positively to the idea of looser money, the broader financial community is wary. Analysts warn that such a move could easily reignite inflation, the very problem Powell and the Fed have spent the last few years fighting to bring under control. This isn't just a concern for big banks and investors, it has real-world consequences for everyday Americans. The interest rates set by the Federal Reserve influence everything from mortgage rates for homebuyers to the interest on credit card debt and car loans. If a new Fed chair cuts rates too quickly, it could make borrowing cheaper in the short term. However, if those cuts lead to higher inflation, the cost of everyday goods, from groceries to gasoline, could surge. This would erode the purchasing power of families, and any savings from lower loan payments could be quickly wiped out by the rising cost of living, hitting lower and middle-income households the hardest. The stability of the United States economy, is built on the world's confidence in the dollar and in the independence of the Federal Reserve. A change in leadership that is perceived as politically motivated could damage that credibility. International investors might become hesitant to hold United States debt, potentially leading to a weaker dollar and higher borrowing costs for the United States government. This would make it more expensive to fund everything from infrastructure projects to social programs. The global economy is deeply interconnected, and a volatile or unpredictable United States central bank creates uncertainty for our trading partners and allies around the world. In the end, the decision about who leads the Federal Reserve is one of the most consequential economic choices a president can make. The outcome will shape the direction of the United States economy for years to come. It will determine the path of inflation, the cost of borrowing for millions of Americans, and the standing of the United States in the global financial system. As Washington waits to see if Jerome Powell will serve out his term, the world is watching. The stakes are incredibly high, and the choice between a policy of steady, independent management and one of aggressive, politically driven growth will have a profound impact on everyone from Wall Street to Main Street.